The female leaders that I look up to are the ones that are really action focused. They are doing what they say they're going to do, basically. They're doers, they're action focused, they're authentic, they bring a team of people together.
Okay, well, welcome to Convos on the Couch, where I'm lucky enough to be joined on couch with leaders all across the country and overseas, and no more lucky than anyone else today. But I've got Julia Spicer, who I know well from the region where my mother's family from and all my relatives from Gundawindi. So welcome to Couch, Julie.
Thanks very much for having me, Tom.
Touching on a few things, I mean, you're very busy. We're just about to rock into International Women's Day in a couple of days' time, which is exciting. But councillor for the Gundy Regional Council, co-founder of Connection Table, advisory board member of Humans of Agriculture, and additionally board member of Motherland Australia. You've got plenty going on.
Yeah, I mean, there is always something going on, but I guess for me, I'm pretty clear on where I want to invest my time, whether it's a paid role or volunteer my time to. And it all pretty much sits around regional activity and stuff that's making our regions really good places to live, and it's making those businesses in the region some money. So that's the kind of stuff that I like getting involved with.
And the pressure in those regions, obviously through our network and majority of our work, all through those regional areas, and has been since day one back in 2000. The infrastructure pressures that get put on those towns, it's just expanding further and further, isn't it, in that space? Yeah.
People often talk about the city-country divide and there's all of these differences between us. There's really not. Like, if we think about, we're in downtown Brisbane and we think about the challenges here around employment, finding people for jobs, finding them a home, finding their kids somewhere to go for childcare, or, homeless, whatever the issue is, the issues are not that different. How we solve them and how we look at them, that differs. But I think one of the things that often, you get to travel everywhere, so you're in a different position. But I think one of the things for people when they actually visit or end up living in the regions is it's not that the challenges we're working with are not that different. It's just how we've got to solve them, a bit of innovation around that. We might not have all of the services, whatever, but the problems themselves are rarely that different, I reckon.
Yeah, and what about, I suppose, there's a lot more people putting their hand up to solve the problems in metro areas. At what point did you go, right, well, I'm going to put my hand up and I'm going to make sure that, this area is on the map and we get the support we want, or we give the support to the people and the small businesses and the medium-sized businesses? Like, where did it, I suppose,
where did that come from?
Where did it come from?
So I grew up in Western Queensland. So I grew up in a little community area north of Roma. So it was one of those typical places, a bit like Kindon. The community I grew up in was Bymount, so a little school on the side of the road. We had a tennis court and a cricket pitch, and when I was at the school, there was about 15 of us in grade 1 to grade 7. So this is like in the early 80s. And we had a really strong community there of farming families that called that little centre home. And so we had theatre restaurants, and the first Friday of the month, everybody met at the local hall for a barbecue and a few beers. And for me, it really was the beginning of that piece of contributing to something bigger than yourself. So it didn't matter whether you were 6 or 66, you were given a job, you played tennis with people from every age group because there weren't enough of us to field a team or whatever it might be. And I was really lucky, there's always that beauty of looking back. And my family, I grew up in a family where the expectation was you contributed and you did stuff, whatever that looked like. And so I reckon that was a really strong value early on. And that community is still really tight. And I reckon that's the difference if you look across different regions, those communities that might have some dramas going on, but where that volunteering and that contribution piece is really important is where everybody gets in and has a crack. And so I reckon that was a really early, fundamental thing. Looking back now, was part of our family. And that really meant that community, I don't live there anymore, but they all still claim me. And I'm really happy for that, right? Yeah. I moved to Gundy.
15 at the school, you want to get along with everyone because there's going to be trouble otherwise.
I was the fastest kid for 3 grades, right? Because I was the only one in the class. So I very quickly ran last the minute one other kid turned up in my grade. So, there's that sense of community was really strong because there just were not enough of us.
Yeah.
And that for me, if I look back now, and the beauty of hindsight is I can see that as a really strong thread through all of my career and all of the other bits and pieces that I do, is that, if I want your business to do well, because if your business does well, so does mine. Yeah. And that kind of, that, what's the saying? Rising tide lifts all ships, all of that sort of stuff, I think is incredibly important in the regions because there's just not enough of us.
And can you think of times where you've just been pushing it up the hill? And,
oh, yeah, for sure.
And going, right, well, how am I going to get my head above the water in that case? And how do you, I suppose, in those environments where there's actually not a great deal of support networks out there, how do you work your network to make sure that it's going in the right direction, I suppose? Yeah,
I have a really random example of one of those situations, Tom, and it was when I was working in Mitchell. So I worked for the Landcare group in Mitchell, and we were starting up this cooperative business between cattle graziers and roo shooters, like all good business partners, right? And what we were focusing on was, in the drought, how did we get to a position where these cattle graziers might think about having kangaroos as an income stream, which meant they'd manage their pastures better, they'd look at their waters, all of that sort of stuff. So it was a drought management thing. How could we do it? And for that to be the case, we had to work with roo shooters. They're not used to kind of working together in that kind of an environment. And I'm in the middle going, hi guys, let's start a business together and let's just, make some cash. And that was a really interesting exercise where half of the team could see what was going on and what the benefits were, and the other half just wanted no change of that whatsoever. Yep. And so it was around trying to help explain and help create a playing field that everybody could get something from it. Everybody could have a win. And that co-op, that business still exists today and brings about $500,000 into that little town, mainly through the roo shooters. And one, I hope they're listening to your podcast. Two, if they were, they would tell you that most of their money goes back to the servo, the pub, and the food works locally. All of that stays there. And so it was really tough, and there were a lot of really rough conversations basically around how we would make something like that happen. And I think what helped in that circumstance was that decision was made by other people in the community. And so I was helping move something that I felt strongly about, but I wasn't the only one that wanted it to happen. And so if it was only about me, then it wasn't a group decision. And I think that's probably one of those things. Sometimes I think I'm doing it for the greater good, and I look around and I'm like, no, turns out this is just for me. I'm the only one that wants this. This might not be a community benefit then. This is just helping Julia. And
what was it for skins or meat or both? Or?
A bit of both. So it was looking at how they, we were stepping into a processing supply chain that was not welcome. And so there was all sorts of fun things that went on in that. But it was looking at how we could encourage shooters to, do things differently when they were shooting on properties, start to monitor for producers. We trained them in using GPSs to do a whole lot of different stuff, but it was moving people out of their comfort zone. And we really easily could have just knocked that project on the head and, sent the money back. We got some funding for it and whatever. But there were enough other people that really could see how this was going to work, and that could show the benefit to the boys that I couldn't get across the line. And I think that's the other thing, right? I'm not going to be for all people, and that's perfectly fine, but we've got to be able to work as a team to see, who's got what strengths and who can talk to what people to be able to get what we're wanting to get that project across the line, or get that event activity going on, right?
Numbers to be able to prove it up,
and data's going to be what really, some people are going to froth over the data, others aren't going to care two hoots about it. You're making them do something they've never done before and they don't want a bar of it. So kind of understanding what it is that people can see as important, and then sort of working towards that for them. Yeah. But the fact that that's still going, there's a group of us that every now and again go, remember when they said they were going to chuck us in the river, or they were going to do whatever to it? That never happened. And look, it's still going on. We've still added that piece of legacy and that extra, a couple of $100,000 to a community that otherwise that wouldn't have been there, basically.
And for the non-roo shooters that are listening to this podcast, kangaroos are a pest in Australia. And so, for example, I think on my grandfather's property between Gundawindi and St George there out near Torwood, I think in 1 week the roo shooters came in and shot 3,500 roos for skins in that 1 week. So it's obviously for a financial benefit for the communities and the farmers, but also really big pest issue for crops and the likes of that.
And we're an interesting, we worked with a lot of Southern African organisations and farmers when we were building that project, because we're one of few countries that don't actually value their native animals in a very rewarding way. We're good with the national park or get a photo with a koala, but otherwise we don't actually look at how we could do things with them and for them and all of the rest of it. So, yeah.
And coming up to International Women's Day.
You want to talk less about the roos then?
Yeah. No, I'm happy to keep talking all podcasts about the roos. But who are some women that you've looked up to and who, even more recently, women in 2026 that you look up to, but also through your life and your experiences?
So the female leaders that I look up to are the ones that are really action focused, so that they are doing what they say they're going to do, basically. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they're world leaders or all of these big names. I look at the work that somebody like Jo Shepherd, who's the CEO of Queensland Farmers Federation, and the way in which she strategically thinks. She's brought people together, works with member organisations around a couple of key things and just is constantly progressing things forward. And so for me, it is really around those core values that I enjoy. They're doers, they're action focused, they're authentic, they bring a team of people together. Rachel Chambers is doing really cool stuff as a food commissioner. We've got some people, you look at what's happening in northern Queensland at the moment, where March 2026, there's been floods through all of northern Queensland. You look at some of the female mayors up there that are just constantly showing up daily. I mean, power to them, I reckon. Yep. There's some great leaders in our regions.
And you look at the next generation coming through at the moment, females into rural and regional areas, and there's been a pretty huge migration of young people into the metro areas and farms, not being handed down. Where do you see the future, I suppose, of females in the bush going forward, and where's the opportunities potentially?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So if you look at often a lot of the extension roles, they're often actually women. So if you look at any of the sort of facilitator style roles, some of the business development roles, they actually are women that are stepping into those roles, and they're often early career women. And so sometimes we've got to be really careful that we don't let stories of the bush get ahead of themselves. So Regional Australia Institute a few years ago did some work about, all of the young people are leaving the regions. And what they found was that's not necessarily true. They just might not go back to their own region. So I grew up in Roma. I went away. I did other things. I've ended up back in the regions. It's just Gundawindi, not my home neck of the woods. But there'd be people in Gundy that have ended up at Roma. So this piece of we're all leaving and never coming back, they were like, there's actually a bit of fallacy around that. We've got to be careful that story doesn't get too far down the road, because that actually doesn't serve us then. And I think the other piece for me is making sure that we don't talk about the regions just as farming and mining, because there's a heap of other stuff that goes on, right? All of those service industries. So there's a lot of young women in the health and education space, in all of those various secondary services. What I would say to anybody who's looking at how they can have a career, and you and I would have heard this heaps in our circles over the years, is if you want to become a specialist, you might need to be in Brisbane or Sydney or Melbourne for that kind of thing. If you want to be a generalist, if you want to learn everything really quickly and it's like a fire hose pointed at you, go to the ED in Gundawindi, because you will see everything all in one hit. And that's the feedback that we get about people. They learnt more in a few years on their Western run than they ever did if they'd have stayed put, in a hospital somewhere, because they'd specialised really quickly. And so I think that my response would be, I've done really well in a career really quickly in the regions because, yes, I was sort of sometimes the only person there. So they were like, you can have the job, but also you've really quickly learn a lot of skills. And so in a couple of years, they were like, who's started a cooperative before? And I was like, randomly, I have, who's applied for grants, who's done this, who's done that. And really, because there was nobody else doing any of that, I got to go, yep, I did all of that. And all of those skills are transferable to anything now.
And they're becoming, there's a lot of those regional areas becoming tourism destinations because it takes you 2 hours to drive anywhere these days. You go an hour and a half to 2 hours or 4 hours out of Brisbane if you want to go to the border of New South Wales. But people are, it's pretty good attraction for a long weekend or a weekend to go to those areas. And, there's hospitality growing in those areas. There's all those kind of things. And you can go and spend 2 hours in the tunnel in Sydney and not move anywhere.
Absolutely.
So it's actually not a long trip to some of these great country communities that are out there.
I remember talking to one of the guys that works in one of the teams in Atlassian, and he was saying, we have a work from home policy and you've just got to be able to get to an Atlassian office within an hour and a half. And I was like, so technically you could live in Longreach because you could fly. Yep. As long as it's the right day and the right time of the day. So, slight asterisks on this claim, but technically you could do that because you could get yourself into Brisbane within an hour and a half on a plane. And so what does that mean if actually all of a sudden we're thinking about anywhere where there's an regional airport, you could technically work for Atlassian. And again, the story could be, but there's terrible connectivity in the regions. Yes, and get Starlink,
Starlink, you can,
which is not a great example
middle of the ocean.
Exactly.
You still get Starlink. I know with our Halcyon Knights brand, our IT brand, we have a lot of contractors that live in very remote areas because it's a better lifestyle and they can do everything remotely from that perspective. Yeah,
so it doesn't have to be awesome. If you've got a beach house, great, hang out there and come into the city. But equally, if you can fly to Brisbane within a 12-hour turnaround, then that means that all of Queensland is, there's a lot of Queensland that's open to you to be living in.
Yeah. And what would you say, I suppose, to, females out there that have doubted themselves in certain roles? And then is there any examples there that you can give me where someone's doubted themselves and then they've actually surprised themselves and, knocked the lights out?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and every year around International Women's Day, this conversation around confidence for young women comes up, and maybe also that piece around, how do we as young women work sometimes when we might be dealing with older men or a workforce that's more male dominated than female, but from a younger person or a confidence perspective. For me, it is around what is the skill set that you have, and let's just start there. We don't need to formalise things around titles. I don't really care how many pieces of paper you've got. That's great. But just what do you like to do? What are the skills that you have? What are you good at doing? And from there, let's pull some things together. Yep. That gives you a skill set that's really transferable. So if you are literally a mum with young kids, you're a younger woman and you're wanting to start out and do different things, if you've managed a household, if you've managed a budget, if you've done, let's call you an ops manager and go from there, right? Yep. We can give you a fancy...
Life skills are generally worth a lot more than what's on paper. So.
100%. We can give you a fancy title. But for me, it's around confidence is about being able to ask for help when you need it and knowing that I genuinely believe people want others to succeed. And so if we start with that kind of assume positive intent and assume that people want to see you do well, my thing that I would love for young women is just to ask more questions and ask for help. But the bit that I get excited about, I reckon, Tom, is with each generation, they learn more quickly a lesson that the older generation took longer to learn. That was really clunky. But, I reckon what my mum learnt in her 60s and 70s, I learnt in my maybe 30s and 40s. I reckon now, by the time, your daughter is entering the workforce, the stuff that we took for granted for ages, she'll be right on top of. And I think that is really exciting, particularly for women in the workforce. We're learning and getting quicker to uptake what people before us have learned. And I think, that's what we're going to need for starters, to be able to get in and get stuff done. The work doesn't stop. We still need humans to be able to do it. But the bit that excites me is, I look at one of my 19-year-old goddaughters and I look at her and I'm like, wow, you are really put together at 19. I really wish I'm closer to 49 than 19, and I don't know that I learned a lot of this really quickly.
I think she's 14. So.
But do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I don't know. I am hopeful. I am hopeful because I see what, the early 20s, early career women are looking at and how they're having conversations now. And in some ways, how they're sticking up for themselves. And I'm like, power to you, sister. I wish I had that at 20, because I reckon it took me until late 30s to get across that. And I look, I listen to what my mum said to me when I was learning it. She's like, oh God, I wish I learned that at your age, because it took me a lot longer. And so I hope that continues. I hope that speeds and continues for our young people, not just women, but particularly some of the challenges that the girls have had. That gives me hope. And
from we do a lot of work with women in non-traditional roles, because we've got large blue-collar business in AWX and New Zealand business in extra staff. Do you think in that non-traditional space, is it a confidence thing, or is it just an opportunity thing where, from a female's perspective?
I think there's still a bit of both. And even this morning in a conversation with one of the women who's involved with Engineering Australia and, talking about her early career stages, I still think it's both. What I hope is that it's becoming more normal to see different people doing different roles. Now, whether that's a woman doing something in a male-dominated area, a browner face in a sea of white faces, a different language, English not as a first language in a sea of, English-speaking people, whatever the difference might be, that we kind of get used to that more and more quickly. And that's maybe where the regions do differ. Yeah. We're still not noticing the different cultures that we might have in our community as quickly as we could be. I think it probably at the moment is still a bit of confidence and consciousness in that industry to be aware of women. And really that's just a bit of practice, right? That's just a bit of practice for the people around there.
And I think also in those rural communities, there's probably more exposure to that non-traditional work. So, my grandmother, if she needed to jump on a tractor and go and do something, she'd jump on a tractor and go do it, where in the metro areas, there's probably not that exposure. So it's taking people out of the comfort zone to an extent, and growing them. And then if you look at the leadership, what are some of the traits that you're seeing in that leadership sort of circle in rural and regional and women in the workforce that you one admire or just notice on a constant basis?
Well, definitely keen on your thoughts on this too, in terms of what you see across all of the various areas that you're working. I mean, I think that I still see very traditional leadership styles, command and, I'm going to stand at the front and just yell loudly and everybody's going to do what I say. I definitely still see a bit of that. I think there's probably still a bit of that in some areas of agri-politics, and, that'll go in time because that's not what's helping us get to an outcome. So I think the leadership that I really admire and I think works is the stuff that gets stuff done, right? Like, we're here for a reason and we want to see an outcome for something. People in a job, crops out of paddocks, whatever it is, whatever needs to be done. The thing that I think is working better now is that we realise that there's different ways to do that.
Yeah.
and we work with whatever the team is to get it done, right? And so we're a bit more collaborative, we're a bit more lead from the middle, we're a bit more, vulnerable in terms of we don't have all of the answers, but let's look at what we do know, and we might not need all of the, we don't need A to Z, but here's the first couple of steps and then let's work the rest out along the way. That's probably my style of leadership as well. And, not great with the detail, can see the end goal and let's just crack on and make it happen. So I like that style. That's my style of leadership. So I'm good in that sort of a team, which means I've got to really concentrate if I don't have team members that's what works for them. But I also, to your point, there's just not enough of us in the regions, right? There's so many roles. Businesses could be kicking the lights out. And it's not that they're not ambitious. They just physically don't have enough people. And I think that for me is one of the really big messages whenever we can have conversations with people is there's massive ambition everywhere. There's just physically not enough humans to be able to do the work at the moment. And so I think that's part of that leadership. How do you not burn people out? Yeah. How do you make sure you can manage all of that and kind of have to set your goals accordingly depending on what staff you've got, or, look for different and innovative ways to get more humans to be able to help.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, that focus, communication, but also accountability.
Yeah.
If you're going to say you're going to do something, go and do it, and then the results will come.
100%.
If the results come, then you speak for yourself.
Oh yeah, and I don't know. I don't know what we do about the not enough humans thing. I really am curious to see where you've seen.
Well, I think, there's got to be attractions. The government needs to be putting attractions onto regions that are falling short. Obviously, we do a lot of sourcing internationally because the opportunities in Australia we take for granted a lot. And so the opportunities for internationals to come into such a great country and earn some really good money that they can either send home or set up themselves for life here, I think we take for granted. But we've also got to, it's a balance between immigration at the moment because it's a political basket case. But I think it's, what they don't understand is there's plenty of opportunity out in those regional areas, and so structure your offerings to those regional areas and make it financially viable.
Yeah.
Because if you make it too expensive for one, someone to move to the area, or two, someone to move internationally into the area, then all you're doing is cutting off the foot that feeds you.
Yeah.
Literally feeds you.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And I suppose if you're sitting on the couch with myself in 10 years' time, what would you love to see in that leadership space in females in the rural and regional areas that would have improved or got better at?
Yeah. So, I would love to see more women in leadership roles. I really am naughty and joke about we've got as many bald men on the Gundy Council as we do women.
Easy with the bald men. You're sitting on the couch with them.
I do joke about, there's 3 women and 3 bald dudes on the council kind of thing, and our mayor who has a full head of hair. But I think, it is that piece around, hopefully in 10 years, it's more normalised, right? And then people go to, well, will we still have International Women's Day, and do we still need women's awards and all of the rest of that kind of thing? And I think for a bit longer I think we do still need it, partly because of that non-traditional side of things. It is a really good opportunity to showcase people ahead. Like I said, I'm in my mid-40s. I do want to know what's happening, and I want somebody in their mid-50s that I can kind of just be a bit behind and follow along. And so I don't have enough attention. My attention span's not long enough to think about what I'm going to be doing in my late 50s or early 60s or whatever. I just look a couple of years ahead, and I've got plenty of great examples, but I want to make sure there's a really good pipeline of that. So in 10 years, I reckon we'll have some more of that, more women in leadership roles, and it won't be so weird. And maybe we're looking at, as a result of that, what are the different leadership styles? What have we learned? What are the new sort of frameworks or models or whatever that can actually kind of really leapfrog us along, because I think, we probably at some stage need to speed up our ability to do some of this stuff.
Well, and I think you touched on it earlier that, the younger generation are learning a lot quicker than us due to the mediums that they're actually being educated on.
Yeah.
So, they'll surpass you and me pretty quickly,
Yeah,
which is awesome. It's great news.
Awesome.
Now I'm going to hit you with 5 quick questions.
Yeah, okay.
And you just got to answer the first thing that comes to your mind.
Sure.
Might be right, might be wrong, but the first thing that comes to your mind. Worst buzzword in business right now?
Oh, resilience.
Yep.
Mm.
Yep. No, that's come up on the couch before. You go to when you're completely fried at the end of the day?
Ooh. Solitaire or Saturday Night Live?
Yeah, right. And a glass of wine? Or no?
Yeah.
No.
Beer.
Yeah. One thing you're terrible at, but your team secretly saves you from.
There's zero secret about it, and it is forms and paperwork.
Yeah.
No secret. They know it, and they still love me for it. But yeah.
Sounds like half our sales team.
Yep.
Your best golden nugget every leader should know?
Assume positive intent.
It's a good one. Good one. The best thing you've read or watched lately that actually taught you something?
Reading Yelena Dockick's 2 books at the moment. She's coming to Gundawindi at the end of the month. Learning I have a very privileged life as a result of those couple of books, and that she is amazing.
Yeah, there's a couple of tennis books out at the moment that are quite unbelievable. And you look at the some of those ones that have been in top 2 or 3 in the world at any one time, and for an extended period, there's probably 4 greats that have been battling it off in the male tennis for the last decade. They actually only average winning 54 points, 54% of their points. And anyway, so we talked about resilience as a buzzword, but literally as soon as they lose a point, they've then got to go straight back into, right, I've got to win the next one, because they win a championship based on actually only winning 4% more than the other person, which is quite amazing. So it's I was reading that recently in one of their books, but it's a pretty interesting stat.
Well, and it's interesting for tennis players because it's such a solo, unless they're playing doubles, but they really, that mindset, it's not a team sport, right? No. Like they are it, and they've got so many people supporting them in terms of also people that they've got to pay to help them with what they're doing. And apart from everything else that she had going on in her personal life, but it's impressive. They are like dogged to the nth degree, right?
They switch on, switch off straight away.
Amazing.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, that's the 5. You survived the 5, but thanks, Julie, for jumping on the couch with me. I really appreciate it, and you taking the time of coming in from Gundy to have a chin wag, and no doubt I'll catch up with you for a beer sooner rather than later. You will, Tom. Thanks. And thanks for recognising International Women's Day too, in terms of the work that you do and being able to have this conversation around it. Really appreciate it. No, awesome. Thanks for that. Cheers.